Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everybody to this afternoon's meeting of the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Brown May. Here. Assemblyman Carter.
Present.
Assemblywoman Dickman. Here. Assemblywoman Gallant. Here. Assemblyman Gurr. Here. Assemblywoman Kasama. Here. Assemblywoman Marzola. Here. Assemblywoman Miller. Here. Assemblyman Miller. Present. Assemblywoman Peters. Here. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. Present. Chair Watts.
And I am here. Thank you very much. We have all members present. We have a quorum. I want to welcome everyone to the committee today, both in person in Carson City, anyone who may be in Las Vegas, as well as those joining us remotely. On our agenda today, we have presentations from the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada, Nevada Energy, the Nevada Rural Electric Association, and Southwest Gas Corporation. We will be holding one public comment period at the end of the meeting. Before we start, I'd like to make a few housekeeping announcements. We are going to start our meetings on time, just like we did today. If you wish to testify, please sign in at the table by the door and provide a card to our committee secretary if you have one. We may take agenda items in a different order than is listed. In addition, if you're submitting any exhibits or amendments to our committee, please send them as a PDF to our committee manager via email no later than 1:30 p.m. on the business day prior to the meeting. Anyone who wishes to receive copies of the committee's exhibits should go to the Nevada Legislature's website, where you can also sign up for committee information using our personalized legislative tracking. We will ask that all public comments be kept to 2 minutes, so that folks interested in speaking can be accommodated and allow us to get through the agenda in a timely manner. Speakers are asked to avoid repetition in their comments, and you may submit comments in writing up to 24 hours after the meeting, again by sending them to the committee's email. So, with that, we have a powerful lineup of presenters today. And we will begin with the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada. Welcome. You can introduce yourselves for the record and begin whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair Watts, Vice Chair Brown May, and members of the committee. I am Stephanie Mullen, Executive Director of the Public Utilities Commission, and with me is our General Counsel, Garrett Weir. Today, we're going to share a brief overview of the agency's operations and structure, including types of proceedings and industries that the PUCN regulates. The PUCN is a regulatory agency that ensures investor-owned utilities comply with laws enacted by the Nevada Legislature. The basic regulatory duties, powers, and scope of work are defined by the legislature and codified in statute. The PUCN regulates approximately 400 investor-owned utilities engaged in electric, natural gas, telecommunications, water and wastewater services, gas and electric master meter services at mobile home parks, and some propane systems. The agency is also involved in monitoring gas pipeline safety, which includes monitoring the design, construction, operation, and maintenance of gas systems and underground excavation near subsurface installations. Additionally, the Rail Safety Division monitors 4 disciplines within the state. They are hazardous materials, operation practices, motive power and equipment, and tracks. The continuous involvement in the monitoring and oversight of these safety programs helps ensure our safe infrastructure in Nevada. Now I'm going to move on to the organizational structure, which also plays a very important role in meeting requirements set forth by our agency. The 105 full-time employees are contained in 2 distinct parts within the agency. There's the commission and regulatory operations staff. The commission is a quasi-judicial 3-person panel appointed by the governor in staggered 4-year terms. Our current commissioners, Chair Haley Williamson, Commissioner C.J. Manthe and Commissioner Tammy Cordova preside over contested cases and make decisions regarding operations of public utilities. The Regulatory Operations Staff, often referred to as staff, is an independent division that investigates and audits utility operations and participates as a party in all proceedings before the Commission. Careful attention is given to ensure independence of staff, and the Commission is prohibited from communicating with staff in any manner that undermines the due process rights of other parties. However, because the Commission and staff are housed within the same state agency, they share certain administrative support for matters unrelated to the respective roles as decision maker and litigant in contested cases. And finally, just a quick note on funding. The PUCN is not funded through the general funds programs. We are funded through an annual regulatory mill assessment. The mill assessment is an annual calculation that is made based on the revenues for utilities that operate in the state of Nevada. Using reported revenues from the utilities and the PUCN's anticipated expenditures, we're able to determine what the mill assessment rate needs to be set at in order to meet the needs of the agency and keep the agency within optimum reserve range. And with that, I will pass it over to Mr. Garrett Weir.
Thank you. For the record, I'm Garrett Weir, General Counsel for the Public Utilities Commission. I'm going to walk through the types of proceedings that the Commission holds and the various types of services that the Commission regulates. Ms. Mullen mentioned the quasi-judicial nature of the PUCN. It's an executive branch agency, but it performs quasi-judicial functions in presiding over contested cases, and it performs quasi-legislative functions in adopting regulations. Rate making is also a quasi-legislative function. Most of the contested cases at the PUCN are applications submitted by utilities, the most prominent of which are rate cases and requests related to resource planning. Resource planning is a process through which the Commission determines future needs for utility service and approves a prudent course of action for ensuring that utilities will be prepared to satisfy those needs. In a rate case, the Commission determines the cost of providing safe, reliable service to customers and sets just and reasonable rates for the utility to recover those prudently incurred costs. Other types of contested cases are customer complaints and proceedings in which the Commission investigates whether regulated entities should be subject to administrative penalties for misconduct. Rulemakings are where the Commission adopts regulations, generally following legislative sessions to implement legislation. The Commission also occasionally conducts rulemakings pursuant to its general authority to adopt regulations necessary to carry out its duties. The ability to file a petition with the PUCN provides an opportunity for people to request general relief in the form of advisory opinions or declaratory orders regarding matters within the jurisdiction of the Commission. Finally, the Commission regularly conducts investigations to examine matters related to utility service. The electric sector that the Commission regulates primarily involves two electric utilities in the state that provide regulated retail service. Those utilities are Nevada Power Company in the south and Sierra Pacific Power Company in the north, and they both do business under the name NV Energy. For the rural cooperative associations that provide electric service within the state, the Commission's regulatory jurisdiction is limited to their service territory boundaries. The policy for the Commission not having oversight of the terms and conditions of a co-op's electric service is that the co-op is ultimately accountable to its members. There's a political mechanism through which the leadership of a co-op can be unelected if members are unhappy with management decisions and the resulting service and pricing. In the electric sector, the PUCN regularly presides over cases involving rate making, integrated resource planning, and permitting. And as previously mentioned, there are many cases implementing numerous state policies and programs related to things like renewable energy development, energy efficiency, and consumer protection. These cases affect the pricing that Nevadans pay for electricity, as well as short and long-term planning obligations for utilities who serve Nevadans. The rates charged to customers of electric service consist of various components intended to recover particular costs. The largest component, which appears as electric consumption on your bill, includes fuel and purchased power costs and all other general costs of operating a utility not specifically collected by another rate. Other rate components recover costs associated with legislatively mandated programs related to renewable energy, energy efficiency, natural disaster protection, and low-income assistance. The rates set by the PUCN, which must be just and reasonable, allow for recovery of only prudently incurred costs, plus revenue sufficient to provide utilities with an opportunity for a reasonable return on capital investments. Notably, the PUCN does not allow NV Energy to earn a profit on fuel and purchased power costs, such as renewable energy power purchase agreements, or on operations and maintenance expenses, such as employee salaries. Finally, it's important for customers and policymakers to recognize that rate-making issues are generally zero-sum in nature. There are rarely win-win outcomes when parties are arguing about who should pay for the costs that were incurred by a utility. Allocating fewer costs to one party will result in allocating greater costs to another. Inevitably, the parties who are the losers in this decision-making process, or who have to pay more, will be unhappy with the results, causing the PUCN to regularly draw the ire of nearly every industry and type of utility customer within the state. For parties who believe that a commission decision is inequitable or unlawful, there are processes in place to seek an appeal. First at the administrative agency level through reconsideration or rehearing of a matter, and subsequently through judicial review by the state's courts. The PUCN regulates two investor-owned natural gas utilities, Southwest Gas Corporation and Sierra Pacific Power Company, which, in addition to providing electric service throughout northern Nevada, offers gas service in the Reno area. For these utilities, the PUCN holds proceedings that set rates and implement legislative policies such as the promotion of energy conservation and the use of renewable natural gas. The PUCN also licenses alternative sellers of natural gas who provide service to large industrial and commercial users in the state. Finally, the PUCN oversees gas pipeline safety in partnership with the United States Department of Transportation, Pipeline, and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, or PHMSA, Office of Pipeline Safety. As with electric utilities, natural gas utilities recover the costs of purchased fuel, that is the natural gas that they sell to customers, on just a dollar-for-dollar basis. They aren't allowed to mark up the costs of the natural gas that they sell. The return is on the investments that they've made in infrastructure to deliver the natural gas. In the sector of water and wastewater, the PUCN's primary regulatory activities include ensuring that the delivery of clean, safe, and reliable service to customers at reasonable rates. The PUCN monitors the quality of service, environmental compliance, and financial performance. The Commission fully regulates the rates, service quality, and service territories of 27 investor-owned water and wastewater utilities in the state, serving approximately 22,300 customers. Notably, the PUCN does not have jurisdiction over some of the largest providers of water and wastewater service in the state, because the definition of public utility in the NRS excludes entities subject to regulation and control by any municipality, town, or village, unless otherwise provided by law. For rail, as Executive Director Mullen mentioned, the Commission has personnel who regularly perform inspections and are specialized in areas of inspection that enforce federal regulations. For telecommunication, which is largely a deregulated utility service, the Commission does fully rate regulate certain small-scale providers within the state in rural areas. There are 10 of those. The rest of the Commission's 322 telecommunications providers are comprised of incumbent local exchange carriers and competitive suppliers. The Commission does not rate regulate those entities. It regulates programs that some of those entities are able to draw from federally and at the state level. For example, there are 30 eligible telecommunication carriers in the state which are able to access federal Lifeline program funding. 26 of those receive federal Lifeline support to provide discounted telecommunication services to low-income customers, including mobile service and broadband access. We also have 9 eligible telecommunication carriers receiving high-cost support in the state to subsidize the build-out to more rural areas where the cost of providing service is more expensive. Utility regulation continues to evolve with the development of new technologies and ambitious public policies to advance the safety and reliability of service, as well as conservation, environmental protection, and economic development. As a result, the PUCN's duties expand every year, and the issues before the Commission continue to grow in complexity. We're constantly addressing exciting, nuanced issues that affect all of Nevada's residents and visitors. As I mentioned, it's often difficult for the PUCN to arrive at outcomes that please everyone, but the people and processes at the agency are focused on achieving evidence-based decisions that equitably balance the interests of utilities and consumers. The PUCN embraces its changing role, which now includes facilitating innovation where appropriate to advance the public interest. Increasingly, the Commission is faced with unprecedented proposals that require problem-solving and thoughtful consideration of costs, benefits, and risks to advance public policy while protecting ratepayers. And with that, my portion of the presentation is concluded, and we're available to answer any questions.
Thank you both very much for that overview. We'll start with questions from Vice Chair Brown-May.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for that presentation. That's a lot you have going on there. I have two questions, and I'm wondering if you could touch on a little bit about the gas pipeline safety. How big is the pipeline? How much of it are you monitoring? Where are we with regard to national standards for safety in pipeline management? We'll start there.
All right, I tried to jot down some of what you're asking, so let me know if I didn't cover everything. As far as how much pipeline we're monitoring, we monitor all of the pipeline that's controlled by the jurisdictional operators within the state. You may be able to get that number from Southwest Gas later, but otherwise I can certainly get back to you with that specific information, how many miles. As far as national standards, we actually are proud to say that we are ranked #1 in the country for our pipeline safety program. So it's great to be at the top of a good list like that. And I can also forward to the committee some of that specific information. I'm sure our pipeline safety division would love to share details. I know there was more to your question. If you don't mind including what I missed.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. It's good to hear that we are ranked #1 with regard to safety in our pipeline. So I appreciate that, and I think you really kind of hit it. I was curious to know really how much pipeline is the PUCN responsible for monitoring to ensure that we're safe, but it's nice to know that we are at the top of the safety list, so thank you for that. My second question would really be about emergency preparedness and disaster planning and the sustainability in the grid. A lot of our neighbors to the west have experienced brownouts, right, intentional outages of power. I'm curious to know how are we doing with regard to some of the disaster planning pieces relative to how we're able to serve our ratepayers throughout Nevada? And I'm just curious to know if you have additional information on that issue.
Well, wonderful question. For the record, Garrett Weir. So the commission regularly plans, as part of the resource planning process that I mentioned earlier, we are always looking at maintaining reliable service, making sure that there's adequate resources available to provide service. And so some of the planning that we do for those sorts of peak weather events, as we look at changing trends in weather and usage, we're making sure that we're prepared. When there are those unprecedented or emergency events that arise, and wildfires, for example, would be an example, we do have a separate planning process called the Natural Disaster Protection Plan that the electric utilities file. They file an initial plan, and then there are subsequent recovery proceedings. And that plan focuses on the investments and planning appropriate to mitigate both the risk of those incidents occurring, how do we respond to certain conditions that increase the likelihood of there being a fire caused by electric infrastructure, and then also to how we respond to those events and ensure that service is restored promptly and safely. So again, I think the electric utility would be happy to expand on that program when they're speaking later. But it is something we're proud of the work that's occurring. It's a new innovative approach, and so there have been some growing pains with figuring out exactly how to implement the policy that was passed at the legislature. But we think we're getting there and continuing to have proceedings. I think the next plan is going to be filed soon in March.
Thank you. Additional questions from members? Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation today. I had similar questions to my colleague about how we were addressing climate change adaptation planning, but I want to go a little bit back to talking about how your agency manages transmission infrastructure planning in particular. How are you working with the different land managers and the different industry entities to help plan out what transmission in the state looks like, and how those transmission plans integrate emergency preparedness as well.
So the state's transmission planning process, that there is a component that occurs through the resource planning. That's, any sort of significant investment that's made by the utility, the electric utilities, to meet the demands on its system from a transmission standpoint. Those are included in resource plans. But as far as what that plan looks like, some of that, at least recently, has been legislatively prescribed. So the Greenlink project, for example, is something that last legislative session, SB 448, prescribed really what our at least short-term transmission planning is going to look like, as far as a need for that build-out. There can be supplemental proposals submitted by the utilities through the resource planning process, for sure, and everyone can vet those proposals. But our at least short-term needs have been prescribed legislatively. As far as the commission's review for like siting or land management, we have what's called the Utility Environmental Protection Act in the state, where the commission essentially serves as a clearinghouse for all of the permitting agencies in the state and federally. So we basically ensure that any project that is being proposed obtains the appropriate permits from all of the state and federal entities, that there's been an assessment of environmental impact. And so we basically are the forum for folks looking at what happened at other agencies and ensuring that there's compliance. But we don't conduct our own, environmental impact assessment. We rely on the findings of other entities.
And those include federal entities in those cases?
Correct. So like the BLM, when they do an environmental impact assessment, we would defer to that, the expertise of that entity, rather than conduct our own environmental assessment.
I have one more, if I may. Thank you so much. So does your office have a tribal liaison? As we heard yesterday, there's several federal grants that are allocated out to states and tribal governments that allow for the build out of solar or other renewable energy projects and microgrids. So how are you working to integrate those future planning projects into the PUC's overall landscape of how energy works in the state of Nevada?
So I believe, we have...
Your name for the record, Mr. Weir.
Apologies, Chair. For the record, Garrett Weir, General Counsel for the Public Utilities Commission. I believe we do have, a designated point of contact for tribal dialogue. However, we don't have a dedicated employee whose primary responsibilities are as a tribal liaison. Generally, the involvement of tribes would be more formal through our proceedings, which allow intervention from parties who possess a direct and substantial interest in those proceedings. For projects that are sited on tribal lands, we would still be involved in determining the need for a utility to rely on those resources, but we wouldn't be involved in, overseeing the development of projects that are carried out independently by a non-utility power developer.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Gallant.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, thank you for your presentation, and I was interested to see if you could tell us a little bit more about the programs that you have for providing broadband to rural areas. I have got some rural areas in my district, and one of the things I typically heard was, particularly during COVID and everybody's trying to homeschool, that dial-up could not handle the Zoom, and so things were crashing. And when they would reach out to see if they could get more high-speed internet, the cost was quite exorbitant. So I'm wondering if there is some type of resource that we can guide them to. Thank you.
For the record, Garrett Weir. I can provide you probably with a follow-up and more detailed information about some of the programs that exist and who the carriers are who are accessing those programs. I do know that there are federal programs that provide assistance or subsidize the cost of build-out in rural areas for broadband. We do have a state program as well that can be applied to that purpose. So, but I can get you more information about the specifics of those programs.
So what I understand with the federal funds is that it is requiring 100 MPB, I think it's download, and it doesn't exist on the western part of the United States. So we can't even touch that money for the rurals. Like we're around 10 to 20. I even tested at my house in the middle of Henderson, and I was at 20. So it seems to be a little bit of a disconnect on that federal funds that we have.
For the record, Garrett Weir, I will make sure that I'll talk to our specialists with telecommunication and be able to get more details as to eligibility, what the parameters are of some of those programs. I think that there are some just basic access programs that shouldn't have such high thresholds for participation, but I'll find out more and get back to you.
Thank you. Any other questions from our members? Seeing none, I have a couple. Staying on the topic of federal funding brought up by some of the members, could you just speak a little bit more to how all of the recent federal funding factors into some of the proceedings and decision-making that the commission undertakes?
For the record, Garrett Weir. Wonderful question, and it's something that we're still trying to figure out exactly what the implications are of all this federally available money. The commission did initiate an investigatory proceeding recently. It's PUC docket number 22-04022, and that's an investigation regarding funding available under the IIJA and IRA. So our chair actually is in the audience, Haley Williamson, is presiding over that proceeding and has directed our jurisdictional utilities to report back regarding opportunities to access those funds and how we may be able to incorporate the available funding into our planning processes. So it is something we're very mindful of, and anything that we can do to make sure that we can offset the costs of necessary planning with those federal funds to ultimately reduce the rates or costs borne by customers in Nevada. I mean, that's a huge priority for us.
Thank you very much for that information and context. The other question I had is less from a budgetary perspective, but I know that legislation has continued to modify different or add different planning elements for utilities, and there are timelines related to that. There's only so many days in a year and a 3-member commission. So I was just wondering if you could speak to kind of the overall workload of the commission and how both the commission itself and staff are managing the kind of growing complexity when it comes to utility regulation.
Thank you. For the record, Garrett Weir, that's an accurate observation, I think, that we are being tasked with more, and we still have the same timelines that are applicable. We are unique among most state agencies and even among our colleagues across the country with some of our statutory deadlines. We don't have the opportunity to postpone because we didn't have time, or we have fewer resources, or we don't have people filling some of the positions that are necessary to conduct a review. And actually Nevada, there's statutory language that a lot of these applications from utilities for things like a rate increase, they are deemed approved if we don't decide on those cases by a certain date. So, we are asking our employees to do more and to still meet those deadlines. I think we've done an admirable job of meeting those statutory requirements, continuing to carry out the duties and obligations of the commission, balancing the interests of utility shareholders and customers as we're charged with doing. It is reaching a point where, we do hear, and maybe someone from our regulatory operations staff, which as Director Mullen mentioned, participates as an independent intervener in all of our proceedings. But as there's more workload, it's basically the equivalent of having more, a bigger caseload for a law firm that has the same number of attorneys and the same number of expert witnesses. And so it seems as though there is a growing need to prioritize cases, and we're still getting things done, but maybe we don't get to give the same level of scrutiny to everything that we have historically, and have to start prioritizing with the resources and time we have. So we would certainly be open to discussions about re-examining some of those timelines that exist in statute, because the more time that we have to review some of these requests, the more comfortable we feel that we've reached the right decision in the public interest. Recognizing that sometimes, there are timelines for a reason, and it's important not to delay planning.
Thank you very much for the candor in that response. First of all, thank you for all that you do, and for your diligence in remaining keeping to those timelines. I know that when it comes to some other regulatory processes, we do set deadlines in statute, and they're not always met. And I understand that there's some consequence if the commission's timelines aren't met, but do want to express our gratitude for your ability to meet that. And I think it's important for members of this committee to keep in mind the increasing pace of society that demands that we try and address things in a timely manner, but also the increasing complexity of that's involved in evaluating some of these different issues. So again, thank you very much for your time and for your presentation today. With that, seeing no other questions, we will move on to the next item on our agenda. So thank you. Next up, we have a presentation from NV Energy. Welcome to both of you. Whenever you are ready, you can introduce yourselves for the record and begin.
Chair Watts, Vice Chair Brown-May, and members of the committee, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here with you today. My name is Ryan Bellows, and I'm the Vice President of Government and External Relations at NV Energy. With me here today is my colleague Marie Steele, who serves as our Vice President of Integrated Energy Services. Over the last few legislative sessions, this committee has really driven energy policy that has shaped the state, and has really driven Nevada towards a clean energy economy and a clean energy future. And today we're going to cover and highlight several pieces of those legislation that have come out of this committee and review those, and also review the role that NV Energy has played in carrying out various programs and pieces of legislation that have come forward. So taking a step back, so NV Energy, we've provided energy to the state for a long time now. So in northern Nevada for over 150 years, and in southern Nevada since 1906. And so we generate, transmit, and distribute energy throughout most of the state. And we also provide gas service up here in the Reno-Sparks area, I should say. And so we have just over 2,200 employees across the state, and with an average tenure of 14 years. So I'm at 12 years, so I'm almost there. And we have over half of our employees are represented by the IBEW, which has been a fantastic partner for us and has provided us with a safe, trained, and skilled workforce. So certainly grateful for that partnership with them. So just highlight that we are a major taxpayer for sure. We paid in last year over $267 million. So instead of giving a tremendously deep dive into NV Energy's inner workings, I thought it would be helpful to really focus our time today on the energy policies that have come out of this committee. And so I'll start with some of the renewable energy goals that we have and that the state has. And so even before the state adopted its renewable energy portfolio standard, back in 1987, we actually signed our first renewable energy contract to provide geothermal energy. And so since that time, our portfolio has certainly grown. In 2021, we served the state or our customers with close to 32% renewable energy. And the portfolio standard requirement for 2021 was 24%. So we are well on our way to achieving the goal that's been set, which is 50% by the year 2030, and also on our way to delivering net zero carbon goals that have been set by the legislature by 2050. So we have certainly, since signing that first renewable energy contract on geothermal, we've added several other forms of renewable energy and have a large portfolio across the state. So Mr. Weir with PUCN mentioned a little bit. I'll just briefly touch upon the integrated resource planning process, but the short version of it is that we plan and refine those plans both to serve our current load, our current customers, and also forecast what the load is going to be for the future. And the goal for us is to be able to deliver both reliable and affordable energy for our customers. And so we have close to 6,000 megawatts of generation that we own and operate and are able to dispatch for customers. We also, for any remaining energy needs that we have or that our customers have, we would then procure that on the open market. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So as we look back in the past few years, and as we forecast what is needed over the next couple of years, or even 3, 4, 5 years, there are some real concerns in the western region about the availability of energy supply. And so just a couple quotes provided. I won't read those, except I'll read the bottom one, that there is an urgent need for the West to address resource adequacy issues now. And so there is a projected shortfall, particularly during those peak periods of time. So that's typically June through September. And that is a shortfall that we would clearly like to avoid for our customers and for the state. So just to kind of paint a picture as to kind of what the shortfall looks like, I'll cover a period of time that occurred in September of this last year. So this was around the Labor Day holiday, and during that week, we saw both in Reno and Las Vegas record temperatures, and that was across the western United States. And so that month, we actually exceeded our all-time September peak that we've ever had, and we kept beating that peak actually 6 times in September. So a lot of areas in the region actually had energy emergency alerts, and there were references earlier today about rolling blackouts or brownouts, and we were able to avoid that in the state, but it was certainly a tight situation. And the interesting part is that typically the peak demand period for NV Energy is July or June, July, August, right? And so this was September outside of that time period. So we're definitely seeing impacts of climate change throughout the region. So after we have planned and forecasted what the load's going to be and dispatched our available resources, during these peak days, we are subject to the market to the tune of approximately 2,000 megawatts that we need to procure on the open market. And it's becoming even more difficult each year to procure that amount of energy to cover our short position. There's been a lot of increased competition in the West Coast. And I think there's been also a limited supply of that generation that's available for purchase. And some of the reasons why is that there are, with the extreme weather that has occurred, especially droughts, during drought season, that would limit a lot of the hydropower that is available in the Pacific Northwest. To the extent that extreme weather has led to wildfires, a lot of those wildfires have actually threatened transmission lines outside of the state primarily, but that would prevent us from purchasing power that would need to be distributed on a transmission line that is near a wildfire. So that also is problematic. And the third thing I'll tell you is that California, their independent system operator, CAISO, they have changed the rules recently to effectively block the import of energy into Nevada during these emergency periods. And so that makes it very difficult for us, meaning that we have to try to source power that's not going to be transmitted through California. So what is the solution to this shortfall? And so we believe that Nevada needs to have more in-state resources that are dedicated to serve Nevadans. We think that these in-state resources, to the extent that they're governed by the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada, will ensure that those resources are both dedicated and available for the state. The second piece of this is what I referenced, is that we need to be able to continue to source resources that won't be transmitted through California. And so we already experienced that during the last summer. We were following that step and working along those lines, and we plan to continue to do that. So the question becomes, if we're going to build these in-state dedicated resources, why now? Why would we do it now, and how's this going to be paid for, right? And so there's been talk about the benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act. I think we really have an unprecedented opportunity right now over the next 10 years to build these projects. The Inflation Reduction Act provides federal tax incentives that include up to 50% tax credits for renewable energy projects and standalone battery storage or storage overall. And so essentially, I like to say the projects are half price. And so we're certainly gonna pursue that. And so for any of the projects that are built by us, every penny of those federal tax credits will flow directly through to customers. And so the time is now. Let me turn to another piece of federal legislation. And I won't spend a ton of time on this, but I know that we have the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And so Mr. Weir mentioned that there is an investigatory docket. So we have reported out to the PUCN about the efforts that we've undertaken. Also included the members of our federal delegation. But there's really, on the grid side of things, there's two, I think, exciting opportunities. And so one of those opportunities is the Grid Resilience and Innovation Partnerships Program. And so those are competitive bids. And so NV Energy is eligible to submit for those federal funding opportunities. And I'll just walk through. We've actually submitted concept papers for three of those opportunities. And so the first opportunity that we've submitted for is a $14 million federal grant that would go to help support our copper wire replacement and vegetation management in high wildfire risk areas. The second one, and we did receive word back from the Department of Energy that we've been encouraged to submit a full application on that concept. The second one is a grant that we're seeking for $7 million that would help us utilize grid integrated electric buses. And so we also received initial feedback from the DOE, and they've also suggested that we go forward and submit the full application. The third project that we've submitted for is a $50 million project to increase our transmission capacity that would serve renewable projects. We did get indications back that we are not encouraged, or I guess I should say we've been discouraged from submitting a full application. That doesn't prevent us from doing so, and so we're going to continue to look at and see if there are some tweaks that can be made to get that submitted as well. And so obviously we'll keep the members of this committee informed on that, and also the PUCN through that. So in addition to the Grid Resilience and Innovation Partnerships Program, the second program is the 40101D formula grants that are provided to states and also to tribes. And so the state of Nevada is going to be receiving over $5 million a year for the next 5 years. And so we are eligible to apply for those funds. Those funds are awarded directly to the state and administered by the Governor's Office of Energy. And so we've worked closely with the Governor's Office to make sure that we'll submit a timely application there. And tribes are also eligible to directly apply for those funds. And so we think, I'll tell you about one of the projects that interests us. We believe there's an ability to partner with the Walker River Paiute tribe. There's the line that serves them is in need of a rebuild, and so our intention is to apply for state funding, provide NV Energy matching funding, and then also have the Walker River tribe apply for separate funding. So if we, taking those three sources of funding together, that really does a lot to defray costs for customers on that line. So let me move to a piece of legislation that came out of this committee. It was Senate Bill 329 in the 2019 legislative session. And Mr. Weir also spoke about this a little bit, our Natural Disaster Protection Plan and program. And so I'll just hit some of the highlights. This legislation requires us to submit a plan every 3 years and then to update that plan to really, I like to say, supercharge our efforts to ensure that we're planning for natural disasters, and in particular wildfire. And so we have contracted with various fire agencies to help us clear brush and provide system hardening for our poles. We've also have been able to put together 65 weather stations and 11 wildfire alert cameras. So we have a kind of a robust monitoring system in place, and really have increased the frequency and the comprehensive nature of our inspections and our patrols that we do on our line. So this has been a great program and has helped us to also increase our abilities to react more swiftly during emergencies and kind of build those relationships with our emergency partners, which came in handy during New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, where we faced a historic storm up here in northern Nevada, received over 12 inches of, we call it Sierra cement snow, that heavy snow, right? And so that snow resulted in tree branches hitting wire, and the snow also, knocking wire down as well. 1,400 individual outages that had to be put back into service one by one. And so we quickly stood up our emergency team, brought in all of our crews, or a lot of our crews from our surrounding areas, Elko, Winnemucca, Las Vegas. Also reached out to other utilities to provide mutual assistance from California and Oregon. And so worked hard and diligently to try to get folks back in service. And so that was it was a difficult few days, but we learned a lot, and I think built upon some of those emergency management practices that we had learned through the NDPP process. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Steele so she can talk about a couple other programs that have been rolled out over the past few years.
Thank you, Mr. Bellows. Good afternoon. My name is Marie Steele. I'm the Vice President of Integrated Energy Services for NV Energy. And so what that means for all of you, my oversight is over most of the legislatively enabled customer programs and also the Distributed Resource Plan process, which is also legislatively enabled, to look about how we maximize the integration of those customer programs. So I do want to talk and give you a little bit of an update about two different customer programs this afternoon. One being ESAP, so AB 465. So quick update there is on the community-based solar resources that have been built or are in the process of being built. And so that is the Mojave High School in Clark County School District, was completed on March 9th of 2022. We also, in process, have Freedom Park with the City of Las Vegas and the Moana Springs Center with the City of Reno, going through that selective process, through a voting process with our communities. On the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the enrollment across the different customer programs or customer eligibility, whether it's low-income customers, disadvantaged businesses, or nonprofit organization, an eligible premise customer. So you'll see there in 2022 and then the growth into 2023 from customer participation. I will say our focus over the next year, given the definitions and their requirements around low income and historically underserved communities, quite frankly, across all of our customer programs, is a really large focus of ours. And so we are building that into our customer billing system and then also into our mapping system so that we can get to a much more direct targeted outreach and marketing across all of our programs. And then also a really large focus in partnering with our community-based organizations to get out into the communities with linguistically appropriate and culturally competent marketing materials. So I'm hopeful and confident that these numbers will continue to grow across all of our customer programs. So going to the next slide, wanted to review the customer programs under the PowerShift umbrella. That is our demand-side management program, or otherwise known as energy efficiency for more of a lay term. Also our clean energy program, which is our renewable energy programs, whether that's solar, low-income solar, EV, or battery storage, as well as the economic recovery transportation electrification plan, and then the transportation electrification plan that I actually was in front of the commission for the past 3 days for the hearing there, wrapping out the end of our legislatively required customer programs from Senate Bill 448 last year. So on the demand side management side, we have, just for all of you to know, from a target perspective, it is 1.1 kWh of retail sales, but that creates a broad customer program across residential and commercial. We do have, from Senate Bill 448 last year, a new broader focus on low-income and historically underserved communities. So that filing was completed in June of this year, our second amendment, and approved. And so actively this year working on expanding those programs as well as with new also outreach as well. And just so everyone knows, I know the federal funding is also very important. 3 key stakeholder engagement groups across the year will be around how do we optimize the federal funding. I know we have talked about the IIJA, but also the Inflation Reduction Act. IRA has a whole bunch more, especially for individual customers. How do we optimize this federal funding with ratepayer programs as well, and also looping in, I'm always going to get the name wrong, but the Nevada State Bank, right? So the Green Bank as well, really partnering together to make sure that we're creating a broader perspective of services with a bunch of more money, right? Then as well, the clean energy program, so REAPER as we know it, Renewable Energy Program Rider, that is actually starting to tail down. Right, and so we do have the EVID program, the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Demonstration Program, that came out of Senate Bill 145 in 2017. That is fully subscribed. We do have new EV programs now. So the incentives for solar are now gone. They have been for a little bit of time, but wanted to make that clear. But we still are seeing a great amount of net energy metering applications. We're about 400 applications a week there for NEM applications in solar. Storage incentives are still available, and then LICEP, this will be the low-income solar program. This will be the last year. So definitely this one we are winding down. The Economic Recovery Transportation Electrification Plan is now approved. And so that is a focus on public charging infrastructure in interstate and urban areas. Also, as Ryan pointed out, an electric school bus vehicle to grid trial program. That is in partnership, especially for Clark County School District. If you heard, they received $9.8 million from the EPA Clean School Bus program. And so that funding will partner with some of our funding program to move that forward. And so certainly that design on our customer programs are meant to optimize the federal funding where they may not have had the match fund. So we're really focusing on that, especially with our transit customers as well. That also has a focus on historically underserved communities for 40%, and then also other performance targets as well. And then the transportation electrification plan is for all customer classes, right? And so we have proposed residential, multifamily, fleet electrification, and different programs. And I believe we put on the record yesterday maybe a decision on March 26th. So we're looking forward to getting those programs out into the communities as well. So last, and then we'll open up for, I'm sure, what will be a multitude of questions. Also, the last component of Senate Bill 448, as Mr. Weir mentioned, the Green Link Nevada development, the transmission across. I'm very glad that there's a picture because I am certainly not the expert, but certainly allowing the ability to bring in more renewables into the state and the development for that energy independence with environmental benefits, economic recovery, and system reliability. And with that, that is our presentation, and we are happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. Members, we'll open it up to questions. We'll start with Assemblywoman Kasama.
Thank you for that great presentation and overview. I'm just curious, this is obviously your area of expertise as far as, some of the costs are still high for individual ratepayers with solar systems on their own homes. And what do you see with other companies or organizations coming in that will provide more affordability, that we could have individual solar systems on homes that are not only subsidized for low income, but for the average and middle income ratepayers as well, and hoping there's some exciting developments in that area that we can support individual home sites.
So it definitively, right, so distributed energy resources, whether it's solar, battery energy storage, EVs are going to be storage in your homes as well. So the technology is going to be expansive. And so we do even have in front of the commission now to have utility options and studying that as well for different options for customers. So net energy metering certainly is where that third-party provider can continue to provide that, but wanting to provide more options for different customers.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much to both of you for the presentation. I am curious about about what you all are planning, or have you done any assessments on using some of these federal funds to tackle aging infrastructure that has high incidences of outages and disruptions, and if there is any assessment being done to go into those communities as public works projects are being implemented to bury wires so that these communities are not subject to the vagaries of weather, wind, and the like. Thank you.
Ryan Bellows, NV Energy for the record. Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman. I think a lot of the funding that is available under the Infrastructure Act fits nicely with what you described, and so those are the type of projects that we're going to seek to apply for grant funding. It's any of those grid resilience that have had historical outages or problems, and whether that's rebuilding a circuit or a line or even undergrounding, that'll absolutely be part of the applications that we're going to make, and those are the type of projects that we want to pursue.
Thank you, sir. How are you going to determine which communities and where within the state will be on those lists? And how do the public works or the communities that are being affected get before you to be included?
Ryan Bellows, NV Energy for the record. So a lot of the funding that's going to be allocated specifically for this is through that formula grant process. So the over $5.2 million that's going to be given to the state each year for 5 years. And so the Governor's Office of Energy will be administering those funds. And so the Governor's Office has already held a few different workshops for folks who are interested in speaking as to how those funds should be allocated and put forward. The answer is in that forum with the governor's office is where stakeholders will be able to put forward plans, and we can have a discussion to determine how to use those funds the best for the state. So it'd be in that process.
Go ahead, one more.
So then I'm guessing that there is some communication and data that you are providing to the municipalities so that they know that this is a possibility and that you all can provide them with outage information so that they know to be included in this?
Ryan Bellows, NV Energy for the record, and happy to dig deeper into this, Assemblywoman, and meet and give you kind of all the details around it. We do have a list of projects that we've put together that are in need of repair or that have higher frequency outages. So those are certainly on the list. I'm not sure exactly the efforts that we've undertaken to disseminate all of that. Certainly that will be part of the discussion with the Governor's Office of Energy as we identify which of the projects make the most sense. So happy to follow up with you directly on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please do follow up with the Assemblywoman on that. I know that that is definitely an area of interest in making sure that we have equity in reliability. So next we'll go to Assemblywoman Dickman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you guys for being here, and I hate to ask you this question, but I have to. I'm glad you brought up the storm, and I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about preparedness for an event like this in the future, because as someone who lived it, I have to say the communication, especially early on, was not great. And, we'd go to the website and get an update that turned out to be way wrong, and you really got our hopes up. But, the storm was predicted quite far out, and, then all these things started happening quickly, but I would hope that there'd be some plans and things you've learned from that experience.
Ryan Bellows, NV Energy for the record. So thank you for the question, Assemblywoman. My Assemblywoman, by the way. And I think we absolutely learned a lot through this storm. And I would note that it was the third wettest day in Reno. So it wasn't just a typical storm. It was, and most folks thought it was going to be rain, even till the middle of New Year's Eve. It was actually forecasted that the Truckee River was going to crest and flood. And it caught a lot of folks kind of off guard that it turned to snow so quickly. So we had been preparing already for potential flood-like conditions, so we were fully staffed and ready to go. I think the issue became just with the sheer number of outages that occurred with the, over 1,400. We just needed additional resources, which we tried to bring in as soon as we could. But absolutely a number of lessons learned, which I'm happy to meet with you and share, but especially, and you pointed out on the communication process, our outage response mechanism, the timing on it wasn't accurate, and so that had to be, shut off in the kind of early times. And so certainly apologize for any disruption there, but that we definitely learned a lot and will absolutely be better for any future storms like that.
And I understand. I mean, this was sort of a once-in-a-lifetime event. And the fact that it was so spread out, I mean, it was, our neighborhood, but people across the street had their power. So, and we got to talk to one of the linemen and understood what they were going through too. So I appreciate what you went through and that you did all you could as you could. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we'll go to Assemblyman Gurr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me. This is going to be more of a comment than a question. I really sincerely hope that the legislature continues the natural disaster program they've got. Not only is having out there to mow off the brush and brush the poles, I know of 3 small fires that could have been huge, but because the crews were out there doing that at the time when the lightning struck, they were to pull equipment on them and go. and pulled them off and got them stopped. And I think you're doing a wonderful job there. The wildlife alert cameras, I don't know if anybody else looks at them, but I do. Kind of a constant thing, you know. I also look at the road cameras, and the road into Ruby Valley has been closed twice this winter, and I see that. Anyway, I appreciate what you've done. I grew up in the power company. My dad retired from your power company in 1983, 4. He was a power lineman when you had to use spikes to climb, so I appreciate what you do. So I know how miserable it is to miss Christmases and New Year's and Thanksgivings with power outages in Elko County. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Peters.
Feel like Old Faithful over here. Got a question for everybody. So I'm gonna bring up what my colleague gracefully did not, but our power bills in Reno after being out of power for a week were still astronomical. I paid a third more than I'd ever paid before in a power bill. And then we were out of power for a week, and I actually have damage in my basement, and I know I'm not the only one because our sump pump went out while all this water was hitting. And so our community has been really struggling to get back on their feet. And as you know, groundwater is not something that's covered by conventional home insurance. So we are SOL in my community. I did learn maybe you have a claims program that my community members can apply to, but it's not something readily available and accessible. I do want to mention, though, thank you so much. I had a neighbor up the street who we were talking about the situation in our neighborhood, and she had 8 inches of water in her basement. I had 3. And I reached out just to see, like, what is happening. I was out of town as well. I was not in my home. I had a house sitter taking care of things. It was like just the catastrophic moment for us, and I knew for other people as well. And you were very responsive, and I appreciate that. And we did end up getting our power back on in a relatively timely manner, but still dealing with damages from it. And it's been a month. But I want to give you an opportunity to speak a little bit to the price increases that we're seeing and what has resulted in really just being kicked while we're down after that January power outage and those bills came in.
Ryan Bellows, NV Energy. Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman. I'll speak to the bills. Bills have risen, and the reason for that is that the price of natural gas has nearly doubled. And so natural gas, there's been limited supply in the western region in particular. And so that the cost of that gas, NV Energy does not mark up the cost of purchasing that gas. And so we would purchase that gas either to supply directly to a home, right, up in Reno Sparks for gas, or to purchase that natural gas to fuel our power plants. And so that cost is simply a pass-through and, like I said, no markup. And it has been, every quarter, there is an adjustment that occurs to our bills to track the fuel and power purchase cost that we've expended on customers' behalf to procure that energy or to produce the energy. And so that's what we are seeing. We are not seeing immediate relief in sight, unfortunately. We do think towards the end of the year that those will start to go down, but that is simply a product of the market for natural gas right now, which is obviously unfortunate.
Thank you for that. I also wanted to mention that I don't know what your plan is today or how you're dealing with this now, but I feel like in my neighborhood at least, we called NV Energy about tree trimming during the pandemic, and I had constituents asking the same thing. They were dealing with there were folks dealing with renovations that they were trying to do, and they needed trees trimmed, and NV Energy was not doing tree trimming during the pandemic. Can you talk about how that may have factored into what had happened in Reno during the storm over New Year's?
Ryan Bellows, NV Energy, for the record. That's something I'll have to look into and meet with you directly and provide you information on that. I'm not aware of any cessation of the vegetation management program during that time, but we'll find out and let you know for sure.
Okay, thank you. And I have one more question about micro. It's not about the same topic. So we have talked in here a couple times now about microgrid programs, and California is really advancing this in part because of some of the situations situations we've seen across California with just grid instability and the impact it's had to our vulnerable communities or rural communities and higher risk communities. And so I haven't seen anything in Nevada about microgrid potentials, about any focus on islanding, and even any planning related to identifying communities that are at risk for power outages, emergency power shutoffs, even emergency related to climate change and wildfires, or flooding, or storm events, et cetera. So can you talk a little bit about what you're doing within the microgrid space, if you're planning anything in the future, and where we can find that?
Ryan Bellows, NV Energy for the record. Thank you for the question. So I'll speak to the Mount Charleston area in particular in southern Nevada. So that is an area that is subject to occasional public safety outage management power shutoffs, our PSOM process, which is part of our Natural Disaster Protection Plan. And so in that area, we have implemented a microgrid for Mount Charleston, so that if and when power needs to be shut off in certain areas given high winds, that we're able to kind of sectionalize and just turn off certain segments of that. I don't know if Ms. Steele has any other comments around the viability of microgrids elsewhere.
Sure. Thank you, Ryan. Marie Steele from NV Energy for the record. So to that broader perspective, right, so distributed energy resources in general and what role they will play, we are looking at that, and from different customer program perspectives, very specifically something that is approved, and then also the federal grant that Ryan mentioned that we have been invited to submit our full application, is also looking at the role that batteries and mobile batteries can play. So we do have an electric school bus vehicle to grid trial approved, and then the federal grant is for us to look at using those as emergency management, citing actually stationary V2G chargers at, say, a community center in a historically underserved community to create a resiliency center, and using not just school buses but also electric transit buses for those as well. So we're looking at that from what is approved. And then from a broader perspective, where in a residential space, things that are proposed is also V2G chargers and also battery storage and solar, right? How do we combine those together to create, I don't necessarily call it a microgrid, but also just being able to have that self-sustaining component from a residential or commercial perspective. So we are certainly actively looking at it through the distributed resource plan. We'll probably see more proposed in the 2024 IRP in June as we go through expansive planning processes over the next 18 months on how we better integrate that into our system, is quite frankly a solution on how to meet our decarbonization goals and our resiliency goals. So we are actively looking at it, and so I'm happy to follow up with you on any ideas that you have that we can get into our planning process. I will say that for all of you, if you don't know me already, happy to talk about any of these topics and brainstorm and see what we can bring forth. I love a new idea. So.
Thank you. We'll go to Vice Chair Brown-May.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the great presentation. Always love learning about energy. Sorry about my coughing fit. I haven't gotten my power bill yet up here. I'm just curious to know. I'd like to go back to slide 3. You talk a little bit about you're well on your way to meeting the net zero goals. I'm curious to know, where are you in that process? Do you have a graph or a grid that will sort of give us a picture of where are we in the progress made to net zeroing currently? And then the other piece to follow up on that is, can you show us what parts each one of the energy sources plays in the overall portfolio, the overall grid usage? There's just some questions relative around that.
So I don't have Marie Steele for the record, NV Energy. So as part of our integrated resource planning process, we do have that modeling around the decarbonization towards our 20 and 30-year planning. And so I don't have that off the top of my head, but we certainly can follow up on that, on how we plan to meet those needs, and whether it's through generation and also the demand side management component, and how we meet it from a whole host of technologies with diversification. So that one gets a little wonky quick, and we're certainly happy to follow up on that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think the picture would be helpful. One follow-up, if you don't mind, Chair. Thank you. I'm just curious to know, as we talk about resource adequacy, right, and building out the infrastructure in the grid, should we be using our power differently? if we're accessing renewable sources, solar, let's just say, should we be shifting when and how we're accessing the power that's available on the grid from a consumer perspective?
Marie Steele for the record, absolutely. When we use is almost just as important as if we use less. And so certainly through programs and technologies and also tariff design, we're trying to move behavior to different places. We're also coming up with now having excess solar in the morning. So we are used to having that excess capacity at night and trying to move all behavior to the evening hour if you can, where we have that available capacity, but it's also changing now with our supply side. So even for, say, example, electric vehicle load, we propose to change that time of use to midnight to noon and put that new load in the morning for where there may be excess renewable energy. So education is super key on when we use power is super important, and we're definitely going to be focusing on that.
Thank you. I just have one other question related to the transportation electrification initiatives. And coming back to a recurring theme around federal funding, what amount of coordination has there been, and how does the utilities' efforts complement, in particular, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure, or NEVI program? Kudos to everyone, for the most part, explaining all the acronyms, by the way. Sometimes I get so used to them I don't quite hear them, but I was paying attention. I think we've for the most part managed to define them before we start using them. So
Thank you, Chair, for the question. Again, Marie Steele for the record. Very specifically related to transportation electrification, we have had the great benefit and maybe also the stress of having both the IIJA passed in August or September of last year, when the ERTEP, or Economic Recovery Transportation Electrification Plan, was also required. And then with the Transportation Electrification Plan that was filed in September, we also had the Inflation Reduction Act mid-August. And so both plans, while a little bit stressful, actually have benefited from the design of maximizing federal funding. To the initial point that you talked about, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Plan, NEVI. So the Nevada Department of Transportation has submitted their plan. I believe they have roughly $38 million. It has been approved, and we obviously partnered very closely with them on that plan. For everyone here, it is an expansion. So very fortunately for us, we have experience with the Nevada Electric Highway started in 2015, so that design of what infrastructure looks like every 50 miles has already been worked on. Unfortunately, what we built is not to the standard that is now required, and so we will have to go back and build out some of that infrastructure, but I think it's necessary. So that partnership, our Interstate Corridor Charging Depot program, is aligned to optimize the federal funding for the NEVI. We've also created a transit electrification grant for our Department of Transportation, MPOs, and also RTCs, recognizing they don't always have the match fund or the strategic planning required to get some of the federal funding. So creating a transit electrification group to strategize on how we can optimize federal funding, and then also designed around getting the investment tax credit as well. And then also pairing it from a residential perspective to the high-efficiency home electric rebate. So really seeing where we can. Also committed to the commissioner yesterday that we will continue to turn over stone to make sure that we're optimizing that phone money.
thank you very much for that. And as we see more and more electric vehicles on the roads, and many of us in particular traveling all across the state, we look forward to seeing that build-out continue to happen. Because we are starting to run into some issues. So we definitely need those investments. Thank you again for your time and your presentation today. We appreciate it. With that, we will move on to the next item on our agenda. We have a presentation from the Nevada Rural Electric Association. Welcome. Whenever you are ready, you can introduce yourself for the record and begin.
Okay, there we go. Thank you so much, Chair Watts, Vice Chair Brown-May, for inviting me to be here today. Before I get started, I would actually like to pivot to the screen, if we can, to recognize two of my members who are present with us in Las Vegas. We have Mendes Cooper, who is the General Manager of Overton Power District Number 5 and our NREA Board President. We also have Kevin Robison, who is the CEO of Mount Wheeler Power and our Board Vice President. So thank you both so much for joining and supporting me. And Mendes, I hope that I do break a leg. So with that, I'm not sure if I introduced myself. I'm Carolyn Turner. I am the Nevada Rural Electric Association's Executive Director, and I'm so excited to be here today to talk a little bit more about the consumer-owned utility business model, which may be kind of different to the folks here. I'm pretty sure that if I'm reading your districts correctly, that all of you receive service from NV Energy, though many of you do have rural communities in your districts. Assemblyman Gurr in particular met with us in Panaca last year. I know you're very familiar with the membership, but excited to demystify this group of utilities a little bit and talk more about the members. So during my presentation today, like I said, I'd like to define what a consumer-owned utility is. I'll talk a lot about my members, dive in a little bit more about who these utilities are in Nevada, and then we'll highlight some of the really exciting work that they're doing, particularly in the spaces of commitment to community, innovation, and partnership. So what exactly is a consumer-owned utility? Well, it's a term of art, to put it shortly, that covers a broad array of utilities, but there are really three distinct types. So we have electric cooperatives, which are formed under Chapter 81 of NRS, if you're interested, but these utilities are directly owned by the consumers that they serve. These folks, they own the infrastructure, everything that goes into providing the service, and they're governed by a board of directors. We also have power districts. In NRS, they're general improvement districts, which isn't quite as sexy to say. So we call them power districts in the industry, and they are formed by county commissions and governed by an elected board of trustees. And then last but not least, we have municipal utilities, which are owned by local governments and governed by a city council. Power districts and municipal utilities can also be referred to under the umbrella of public power. So a lot of times you'll hear electric co-ops and public power. Consumer-owned utility is our term to define all three. So even though these utilities are unique, have different qualities about them, they are all united by a couple of common characteristics that I want to highlight for you. All consumer utilities are operated on a not-for-profit basis. They're overseen by democratically elected governing bodies comprised of members from the community, and they emphasize reliability, affordability, and safety for their members. Just as a fun aside, again, we're talking about elected officials. A lot of the folks that sit as the trustees on the boards of power districts also appear on the same general election ballot as yourselves. So they go through the same campaign process in some cases, and I think can commiserate if ever you would like to. So now I'd like to dive a little bit more into who these utilities are specifically in Nevada. The phrase in the industry is, if you've met one co-op, you've met one co-op. Well, if you've met one statewide, which is what I am, you've met one statewide. We are very unique here in Nevada, which I think is something that we hear often, and it's certainly true here. So the Nevada Rural Electric Association represents 12 members. We've just invited or welcomed 2 new members as of January 1, so I'm slowly getting 12 members in my lingo here. 10 of those are going to be what we call distribution utilities. So they have a direct relationship with the consumer at the end of the line. They're distributing the power over these, kind of what tend to be lower voltage lines directly to the home. And we also represent 2 generation generation transmission cooperatives, which are on the power supply side and do not have a direct relationship with the consumer. Their consumers are utilities, if you will. So that's a little bit different, but I'll go ahead and read them all out. We have in our general members, Alamo Power District Number 3 in Alamo, Nevada, Harney Electric Cooperative based in Hines, Oregon, Lincoln County Power District Number 1 in Panaca, Nevada, Mount Wheeler Power in Ely, Nevada, Overton Power District Number 5 based in Overton, Nevada, Plymouth Sierra Rural Electric Cooperative based in Portola, California, Raft River Rural Electric Cooperative based in Malta, Idaho, Valley Electric Association in Pahrump, Nevada, Wells Rural Electric Company in Wells, Nevada, Arizona Electric Power Cooperative in Benson, Arizona, Boulder City Municipal Utility in Boulder City, Nevada, as you might imagine, and Deseret Power Cooperative in South Jordan, Utah. So you may notice that I'm also referencing a lot of different states. We actually have members in 6 states now, which is very exciting, but they all have a relationship here in Nevada providing service. So we really are in many ways kind of a regional organization, which is very exciting. Let's see, and before I move on to our next slide, I want to take a step back and talk a little bit more about, again, what makes these communities so unique. My colleagues that just spoke from NV Energy did a wonderful job, and it's a very different scale that I want to kind of get across, and I think is really important to highlight. Again, Mr. Robinson, who's with us from Mount Wheeler Power, can attest. He serves about 5,000 consumers over 15,000 square miles with fewer than 40 employees. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, but I think that number is right under 40. We also have Harney Electric Cooperative based in Hines, Oregon, that serves about half its service territory here in Nevada. They have 2,000 customers over 20,000 square miles in 2 states with even fewer employees. And our smallest member, Alamo Power District Number 3, has 750 meters, and that's an important distinction because a lot of customers, particularly in an irrigation-heavy area like that part of the state, will have multiple meters, so even fewer customers. And again, I think that's really critical to get across, because for some of our members, the term rural is a misnomer. These are frontier utilities, and I think that's really important to keep in mind. So I'll shift gears a little bit and talk more about power supply. So we do receive transmission services from NV Energy. My members do. So NV Energy helps us get the power that we've contracted for with these suppliers to the utilities to distribute, if you will. So we've got that relationship, but we don't buy power from NV Energy as a direct bundled customer will, if you would. So we have some unique power supply arrangements. The vast majority of my members receive some, if not all, of their power from the Federal Hydropower System, overseen by 2 out of the 4 Power Marketing Administrations, or PMAs. You've really challenged me with this whole acronym thing, Mr. Chair, so I'm going to try to stay on top of it. But we've got Bonneville Power Administration, or BPA, which oversees the Columbia River System in the Pacific Northwest. We also have the Western Area Power Administration, or WAPA, which oversees the Colorado River System. I know we've talked extensively in this state about the drought that's being experienced along the Colorado River, and if you're interested in the unique challenges that utilities that receive service from this PMA face because of this, Mr. Cooper in Vegas contributed to a wonderful article late last year in the Nevada Independent, which it's a different lens to view the issue through. I think we talk a lot about the lack of water, but these communities rely on the power as well as the water, which is double-edged sword, if you will. So in addition to the federal hydropower, like I said earlier, we've got 2 generation transmission cooperatives that provide power to the members, so Deseret Power Cooperative in Utah and Arizona Electric Power Cooperative in Arizona. And in addition to that, where necessary, members will also purchase power, to meet their needs on a bilateral basis. We're not, the membership is not all part of an organized wholesale energy market. 2 of our members members do participate in the California Independent System Operator, their market, Valley Electric Association, which was the first out-of-state entity to participate in CAISO, and Plumas Sierra Rural Electric Cooperative, which of course is based in California. So next, we get to talk about the fun stuff, and that is really the programs that my members, are running. The things that we're most excited about. And first and foremost, I want to address commitment to community. Co-ops, in particular, are governed by what are called the 7 cooperative principles, and this is one of the 7. So the industry thought it was so important that we wanted to make it one of 7 things, and it's a really exciting piece of the work that they do to highlight. So the first piece of this, if you will, that I'd like to talk about is community development. Consumer-owned utilities are unique in many ways because everyone that works for the utility, whether that's the CEO or the person that takes out the trash, who is often the same person, by the way, they all live in the communities that they serve, and they're vested members of these communities. They want to see them succeed, and they participate in a lot of economic development work, providing grant funding and other donations, charitable contributions, doing volunteer work, and helping with bolstering low-income assistance programs and other really critical services. So we've got some lovely images on the screen. I have put together a list of all of the image credits and more information that you can look at some of these check amounts on the last slide if you'd like to. But we have folks from Wells Rural Electric and Mount Wheeler Power distributing checks to the community, and we've got volunteers with Valley Electric Association as well, doing some volunteer work to get toys to kids, or school supplies to kids. There are 2 images, sorry, I'm getting them mixed up, but school supplies to kids in the community, which is really exciting to see. Sorry, talk about drought. My mouth is drying out. Okay, so next, the other piece of this that I'd like to talk about is civic engagement. We talked earlier about the democratic process, and it's absolutely critical to the work that these utilities are doing. Again, they believe in electing, their leaders to make decisions and put the community, in the right direction, if you will. But it's truly a core component of the work that's being done. So there are a couple of different programs I want to talk about, which I'm really excited about. Youth Tour, which is where the image that you see on the screen comes from, is a really exciting program where teens from these communities are flown to D.C. The statewide works with the membership to provide chaperones and get them there to be part of the legislative process, to interact directly with the federal delegation, with their elected members of Congress and staff. Unfortunately, at last year's event, Congress was out of session. It was just the senators in town, or else we'd have had an even bigger group shot. But we've got a lot of really excited kids there with our United States Senators Cortez Masto and Rosen, and it's just a wonderful program. There's also a lot of grassroots engagement programs. So the members of these communities are encouraged to be a part of this political process. We're going to be doing Public Power Day at the legislature on April 6th, so you'll be seeing more information about that. But we're going to bring a bunch of folks in, who are pros at this because they're so involved in grassroots engagement because of their utility and the passion there. And then last but not least, we've got a national program called Co-ops Vote, which all the different members, regardless of organizational structure, participate in. But it's a nonpartisan effort to promote voter registration and election day turnout in America's rural communities. We're connecting these folks with, again, those advocacy resources. This is what's important to vote, about, and here are the ways that you can participate in the process. So it's a really wonderful program. Next, and we're going to talk about some of the things that again, my colleagues from NV Energy just spoke to, but really want to talk about innovation. In many ways, and I think the chair said it very eloquently, that there needs to be equity and reliability, but there also needs to be equity and innovation. We should have no community too rural in the state to participate in, the industry of the future. So we've got a couple of wonderful examples of, ways that this has happened in the past. programs and the projects that we want to take on in the future. This industry, it's no shock to any of us, it's undergoing rapid transformation, very fast change in a very short amount of time. The industry, which started from a relatively simple premise, which is to provide electricity to the consumer, is now becoming a key driver of this technological innovation. This comes from increased or changing consumer expectations, but it also comes from increases in efficiency and ways that we can be looking at the business and doing things differently. So it's a really exciting time to be a piece of this industry, I think. The images that you see here on the screen are all taken in Panaca or nearby at the Lincoln County Power District site, which has been working very closely with the Nature Conservancy. I think we've got Jana Moan in one of those pictures, and Senator Cortez Masto's team to repurpose the former Castleton Mill mining site as a 2-megawatt solar project that the Power District is building. I'm not sure if I referenced it later, it may just be in the credits, but in the omnibus spending bill last year, there was $1.75 million that's coming directly to Lincoln County to make this project a reality, which is really exciting to see. So we've also got the EV demonstration vehicle for Lincoln County. Wellsboro Electric also has one that's called the Green Machine or the Green Monster. It's a very bright, aggressive color of green, and so this is a more palatable image for the slide, but that will be what I show next time if I'm ever asked to come back. Again, as we've discussed, there's also just an incredible amount of investment that's taking place right now, and never more so than these days, with two just transformational, changes or laws passed by the federal government in recent memory. Of course, the bipartisan infrastructure law has significant funding opportunities for these consumer-owned utilities and the communities that they serve. This kind of highlights or reinforces the list that was shared earlier. Grid resiliency is a big area of focus, looking at improving the system in that way. Wildfire prevention and mitigation is another huge component of this bipartisan infrastructure law, funding that's made available, and something that our communities face, on an even more aggressive scale than kind of urban areas of the state. In fact, I'll pivot to highlighting this image that you're seeing right now, which is during a visit with Senator Cortez Masto at the Wellsboro Electric Operations Center in Wells, Nevada. And in the background, you can see some of their firefighting equipment. Utilities are expected to provide multiple services, not just the service for which they were formed in many cases, and one of those services now is firefighting. The employees, many of the line crews of my members are trained and certified as professional firefighters, because that's what it takes. These communities are so far afield that if you're waiting for someone to come, even from Elko, that's not always possible to get to a place quick enough to put out the fire very quickly. So it's really exciting, but also kind of heartbreaking that we need to take this work on. And last but not least in this list is broadband deployment. Assemblywoman Gallant, you mentioned earlier the connectivity issues in rural parts of the state. Unfortunately, none of my members that are able to provide those services, represent or work with your territory or your. I'm sorry, I'm thinking in utility terms, your district. There we go. But certainly that's a very critical component of the work that we're doing. 2 NREA members are currently engaged in broadband or telecom services. Valley Electric Association has a sister company, Valley Communications Association, which is very involved in this work and works very closely with the Office of Science, Innovation, and Technology, OSIT, to connect people that need to be connected. And Pluma Sierra Rural Electric Cooperative also works with OSIT and with Washoe County to expand those services in parts of Washoe County that don't have them. So it's something that we recognize as a big problem, and I'd love to work with you to address that. So in addition to the bipartisan infrastructure law, we also have the Inflation Reduction Act, which did some incredible things for consumer-owned utilities. Previously, consumer-owned utilities were at a competitive disadvantage when it comes to renewables deployment because for-profit corporations like private developers or our investor-owned utility friends were able to take advantage of tax credits. And when we weren't, it meant that comparatively, building these projects was more expensive for consumer-owned utilities. It was out of the money for a lot of these folks because they weren't able to access these same programs. So thankfully, Congress passed, as part of the Inflation Reduction Act, direct pay provisions so that there is access to this, this kind of incentive, ability to reduce the cost of these projects, which we thought were artificially expensive for us. So really exciting to see that happen. And as I've noted in my slide, that is already having impacts for the membership. Deseret Power Cooperative in Utah, which serves Mount Wheeler Power in Ely, has already broken ground on 2 projects to increase solar in the state and diversify their portfolio as a direct result of this legislation, which allowed them to undertake these projects. So we're already seeing the impact of this on the ground, which is really exciting. There was also direct funding to electric cooperatives. USDA was allocated $9.8 billion in grant funding, and we've been working very closely with Director Ingolstad to get some of that money to our communities. And last but not least, I guess I did reference it, or put it in my slide. We've got the 2022 Omnibus Spending Bill, which included those funds for Lincoln County Power District to build their solar project, which is really exciting. Last but not least, I want to close out by talking about the partnerships. This is a very collaborative industry, and it's a collaborative state. Maybe that's because we're a little smaller, a little spunkier, but there's a lot of really good partnership and work happening with all sorts of stakeholders in the state, not least of which, again, our friends at NV Energy. We work very closely with them. They provide those transmission services, which are so critical, the lifeline to these communities. But we also work with them on other programs, the wildfire mitigation. There's been a lot of work, really grateful to their team. They were one of the first utilities that had a wildfire team in the utility, and, we've benefited from their expertise on that and assistance, and work with them on a number of other programs. You can see here that one of those programs is electric vehicle infrastructure deployment. As we heard a moment ago, Ms. Steele mentioned that the standards have changed very rapidly on some of those. So we're working through the hiccups that are created by that kind of rapid change in standards, but excited to continue that work and to see more interstates, highways, and other areas of the state designated as EV corridors. So I've also listed kind of a slew of state agencies that we work with, but this is not meant to be an exhaustive list, and certainly there are other folks in the federal government that we work with too, but we truly believe that we're more powerful together, and that working together gets us towards our goal faster. So that is my presentation, Mr. Chair. I would love to answer any questions that you have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the presentation, Ms. Turner. Members, do we have any questions? All right. I do. Oh, Assemblywoman Miller, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And my question is just for a bit more qualification for my understanding or clarification for my understanding. So it was interesting when you mentioned the difference between rural communities and frontier, and I hadn't thought of it like that. And so in my mind, I consider rural, regardless of how small the population may be, but, our smaller rural, maybe based on agricultural, communities. And then frontier being those under or non-developed, just masses of land, right? Is there a determining factor of when something becomes frontier-based? Basically, so for example, is it geographical measurement? Because if I'm driving from Hawthorne to Arrington, I'm going from a rural community, a small community, to another one. And on that road, I'm still considering myself in the rurals. Am I in frontier, or when does it become frontier? If we could just so that we understand our state better, where we would qualify as frontier communities.
Assemblywoman Miller, an excellent question through the chair to you. I don't know that I'm qualified to answer it quite scientifically, if you will. I'm sure there is a scientific determination. A lot of the reason that I explain things that way, or that I call that out specifically, really comes from our interactions with other states with rural communities. We're part of several national organizations that represent these same types of utilities, and to them, a rural community can be a suburb of Atlanta. If you're talking to the Georgia statewide, and that's just a totally different scale. So again, I'm sure that there is a scientific definition. I'd be just as fascinated in it as you, and so I'd love to follow up with you offline about that. But I think it's to me, or in my mind, it's to describe these utilities that serve these communities that are so far apart and so small. It's one additional notch more rural to me is how I'm framing it, at least.
Thank you. I just had one other question. So we had heard before about, some of the price impacts that folks are seeing. And I know that in contrast to NV Energy, many of your members source significant amounts of hydropower, as you mentioned. We've been fortunate recently to have quite a bit of precipitation going into reservoirs, but I was wondering if you could speak to some of the energy supply issues that your association has been dealing with, particularly during periods of drought.
Chair Watts, again, a wonderful question, and it's a little complicated because there are 10 members receiving power from 2 PMAs and other sources, but I'll try to break it down kind of chronologically as I understood your question. So yes, the members that receive the federal hydropower, particularly in WAPA territory, and Mr. Cooper can also speak to this if I was so bold as to defer to him. But these customers of WAPA, these utilities, it's an incredible price impact to them in the wholesale power costs. And there's additional layers of this, kind of unique to WAPA in many ways. Bonneville Power Administration, BPA, is run and organized a little bit differently, so we'll kind of leave that to the side for now. But WAPA, does require these utilities to pay certain fixed costs, regardless of whether there's hydropower being produced. So the utility may be in a very unenviable position of receiving less or no power from their provider, but still receiving a bill for costs. And so that is then further exacerbated by the requirement to then procure replacement power. So that's an incredible stressor to utilities throughout the desert Southwest, and certainly something that we're very concerned about. We'd like to see more acknowledgement of that side of the problem. Again, there's a lot of talk about the drought, but there's a unique perspective offered by these utilities. We'd like to see that discussed a little more, and hope to see some federal recognition of those issues. So that's kind of that one piece. Then we have the historical amounts of precipitation that have taken place kind of in this region. And that is also creating its own challenges. Pluma Sierra Rural Electric Cooperative, for example, again in Portola, California, but that serves down into Washoe County, kind of around the Red Rock area, up here in northern Nevada. They have been particularly exposed to wildfire risk in the last couple of fire seasons. Just incredible amounts of damage, as we all know. We've seen these horrible images. So because there's so much burn scar now, when we have these historic flows of precipitation, that's mudslides, that's rock slides, that's other damage to the infrastructure. So it's I think the desert Southwest would see all this water as a blessing, and maybe some of the folks up here are also seeing it as a curse. Very catch-22. It's really concerning. So again, those are just two pieces, I think, or elements of that. But ultimately the goal is always to keep rates as low as possible for the folks at the end of the line. We do serve a lot of tribal communities. We talked about that earlier. Other, disadvantaged groups in the state that haven't had that same historical access. And so that's always forefront at everyone's minds, and these external pressures certainly don't make it any easier.
Thank you very much for that and for your presentation and for your members who came down to the Grant Sawyer building, particularly from Mount Wheeler Power. I've been in your service territory before, so I appreciate the effort that you made to be here with us today. With that, we will move on to the last item on our agenda today. Thank you again. And that is a presentation from Southwest Gas. So we will welcome our presenters up to the table. And whenever you are ready, you can introduce yourselves for the record and begin.
Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you all today. My name is Scott Leadham. I'm the Director of Public Affairs for Southwest Gas. With me today is Justin Brown, who is our President of our utility, and just really wanted to go over high level today our footprint here in Nevada, some of the issues we're working on, and one of the pieces of legislation we'll be working on as well that may appear in front of your committee at some point. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Brown, and thank you again for the opportunity.
Thanks, Scott. Chairman Watts, members of the committee, Justin Brown with Southwest Gas. Good afternoon. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about what Southwest Gas has been up to continue to help meet the energy needs of all Nevadans. I'd like to first start on our first slide, which is kind of a statement about kind of really what our focus is as a utility. And what we try to emphasize is making sure that we're doing everything we can to meet and exceed the expectations of our customers, our regulators, and our employees. And we really use the principles of safety, reliability, sustainability, and affordability to guide us in that focus and that journey. Turning to the next slide, we have kind of a snapshot of what our footprint is in the state and provides an overview. So we have nearly 800,000 meters that provide energy service to nearly 2 million people, just over 2 million people. We have a strong demand for natural gas service in the state. Last year, every home builder in southern Nevada that had access to natural gas built with natural gas. We added over 16,000 customers, and so that's really indicative of the demand that's there for our service and that we take great pride in. One of the things I also wanted to touch on was our philanthropic activity. We have 2 financial giving programs. We have our foundation, but the one that, quite frankly, we're probably the most proud of is our employee giving program, which we call Fuel for Life, where employees actually pledge dollars from their paychecks directly to the nonprofits that they choose to support. And combined, we were able to enrich the communities in which we live and work to the tune of almost $1.8 million through those efforts. It's something we're very proud of. Next, I mentioned, one of our focus being customer satisfaction and meeting and exceeding our customers' expectations. This slide really kind of highlights some objective views of how well we're doing in that regard. So for the last 5 years, we've been able to maintain a 95% customer satisfaction ratio. We've had J.D. Power just recently name us for the 3rd year in a row the #1 large gas utility in the West in terms of customer satisfaction. And then lastly, Forbes recently recognized us as ranking as one of the top employers in the state of Nevada. One of the initiatives that was passed was legislation. We refer to it at the company as SB 151. I think it was in the 2015 legislative session. But it was bipartisan, unanimous legislation that was passed that allows us to extend facilities to unserved and underserved areas within the state to make sure that they have reliable and affordable energy And we've been able to partner with the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada on a couple different expansions, one being in Mesquite, and then most recently in Spring Creek, Nevada. And the great thing is through both of those, we've been able to support economic development, but we've also been able to make sure that the citizens in those communities have access to affordable and reliable energy, as well as reducing their carbon footprint by displacing higher carbon-intensive fuels with natural gas. Speaking of economic development, we wanted to highlight a couple projects that we're currently an integral part of in Southern Nevada with respect to Fontainebleau Resort, MSG Sphere, Resorts World, but then also Crown Holdings, which is a project that's in Mesquite, and I think a testament to SB 151 and the success there. Interestingly enough, within the last week, we also had an inquiry from a prospective customer that reached out to me about a week ago that they're interested in developing or moving to the Northern Nevada Industrial Center, 40 miles east of here on Highway 50. And it was interesting because they wanted to reach out because they were concerned about making sure that the infrastructure was there, because as they said, natural gas is critical for their Class A properties. And so again, I think it's just a testament to our involvement in economic development in the state and our commitment to making sure that we're working and partnering with those businesses that are looking to relocate and expand in the state of Nevada. In addition, we're very excited about innovation and clean fuel technologies and integrating those into our infrastructure that we have in the state. One of the things and one of the partnerships that we have that we really like to emphasize is our partnership with the RTC of Southern Nevada. So for a number of years, they've been using compressed natural gas to run their bus fleets. Recently, they've also then supplemented that with renewable natural gas that's then compressed to run their bus fleets. So it's actually a really great success story. Last year, the environmental benefit of using compressed natural gas is the equivalent of displacing over 13,000 gasoline-powered vehicles from our roadways in 1 year. So again, it's a tremendous success story, one that we always like to mention. Secondly, we've been very involved in working with suppliers of renewable natural gas, whether that's wastewater treatment facilities, dairy farms, and we've been able to undertake 6 different interconnects across our 3-state service territory. And the amount of RNG that they're able to bring online that we're able to transport for them in terms of that methane gas that would otherwise be emitting to the atmosphere, we're able to inject it into our system and transport it for use as an end-use fuel energy source. And the amount of RNG that's expected to flow through those different projects will end up being enough energy to power over 10,000 homes for a single year. Yeah, sorry, RNG being renewable natural gas. And it's basically, as I mentioned, kind of the methane that is from wastewater treatment facilities, dairy farms, things of that nature that would otherwise be emitted to the atmosphere that we're able to capture, treat, and inject it into our system and use as part of an energy source for end-use customers. Another exciting opportunity with respect to clean fuel technology is hydrogen. And so we've partnered with UNLV on a proof of concept. The fascinating thing is, it was probably a year or so ago when we started that and we had our kickoff. I was amazed with how much UNLV has done with hydrogen over the years. They have a very long history of R&D with respect to hydrogen. And so we've got a proof of concept with them on creating hydrogen from renewable energy and then testing that in our system as we blend that to, again, reduce the carbon intensity of the fuels that transport through our system. In addition, we're very involved in a regional clean hydrogen hub application that we're going to submit to the Department of Energy to receive funding. To be one of the, I think they're looking to identify about 8 to 10 different regional hydrogen hubs through the Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act that was referenced earlier. And so we've partnered with energy leaders in Arizona, Navajo Nation, as well as industry here in Nevada to be sure to be included as part of that. We're an integral part of that, working with that industry and leaders to seek funding, and hopefully that's something that will come through, because again, I think hydrogen's a great concept that we're very much involved in and looking forward to participating in as that continues to develop. In addition, one of the things that we're also constantly looking for are opportunities to provide options for our customers, right, with respect to their energy needs. And one of the things that we've done recently, we've made a filing with the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada that was approved, which allows us to offer customers a carbon offset tariff. So customers who are interested in offsetting their combustible emissions at their home, they can purchase carbon offsets that as part of their bill. And so it's a great way to give people optionality with respect to their different energy needs and what their focus is. In addition, one of the things that I mentioned previously about our Fuel for Life program, we also have an employee giving program. We refer to that as the Building Lives Up Everywhere, our Blue program. And each year our committee identifies different initiatives that they want to undertake, and throughout the organization we undertake those. Last year they chose educators to go out and support, and we created care packages for our teachers. This year they've chosen sustainability, environment, and beautification, so we're going to be undertaking a variety of different projects with respect to tree planting, community gardens, cleanups, different things. So it's going to be an exciting year with respect to that initiative, something we're all looking forward to. And one of the great things about Southwest Gas is really the strong culture of community that the employees have and the commitment they have to enriching the communities in which they live and work. And then one of the items we wanted to touch on, we're working with Senator Wynn as well as the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada on a natural gas planning bill. This would create a process where gas utilities would make a filing with the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada to identify significant investments to make sure that those are in the best interest of our customers, our state, to make sure that they're going to suit the energy needs of Nevadans going forward. And then that would be part of an approval process and a hearing to let all stakeholders participate in that. So again, that's something that we're looking forward to, and we're continuing to work with the commission as well as Senator Wynn on that for this session. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch on every year we file a sustainability report. It's on our website. That should be being finalized this month. I would encourage everyone to look at it. It goes into a lot more detail on some of the things that I've talked about today in terms of things that we're doing to help, make sure that we continue to provide reliable, safe, affordable, sustainable energy for Nevadans. And with that, happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
All right, we'll open it up to questions. We'll start with Assemblyman Gurr.
Maybe we'll start. There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the presentation. I have a question and then a comment. I can get into, or maybe it's a comment that asks the question. I could probably get into Fort Knox easier than I can get a hold of somebody in Elko County. Your office is locked up. You push a button, somebody may or may not show up. Is there something we can do about that now that you're expanding into Spring Creek? And it's going to be more people. I've had a question this week, and the person may have reached out to Scott about it, how to get a hold of you guys. It's been impossible almost, right on the edge of impossible, and that question's come up a lot. So you don't have to answer that right now, but if you could get back to me. And the other comment is, now that you're in Spring Creek, would you please get gas out to my house?
Yeah, Assemblyman Gurr, or Chairman Watts, Assemblyman Gurr, appreciate the comment. We'll definitely look into that because that's something that we want to make sure that people have a way to access the company, right? And so that's the first time I've heard of that being an issue. So we'll definitely look at it and get back to you. And yeah, hopefully you're on one of the routes to extend facilities. I know I was out there in the fall. We had a ribbon cutting ceremony at Spring Creek High School and had just connected them, and we had kind of driven around and looked at the new Boys and Girls Club that they're building and different things. And so it's very exciting to see that development going on. And yeah, hopefully we'll be able to get to your residents very soon.
Follow up. Thank you. I appreciate that. And not the residents so much. It's, we're okay. But if you could, I'm amazed it's the first time you've heard of that about Elko with accessibility to it. I know one time I came in to discuss some of the land behind the building and nothing. So it would be a real plus if we could figure a way to get into. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to Assemblywoman Peters.
Good afternoon, and I had a question, and I think I forgot my question. I'm sorry.
We can come back to you.
Okay, thanks.
We'll move on to Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being here to give us your presentation. So I visited the showcase at UNLV last summer, and it was really interesting. I know that some of the idea about moving hydrogen through existing pipes is under discussion. I've also read that they're doing some of that work in Europe, in England. Are your pipes built to hold that hydrogen? That tended to be an issue in England, and so I'd like to know how you all are approaching that problem and what your solution is. Thank you.
Yeah. Chairman Watts, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, that's a great question. So each pipe type's different, right? So you have steel pipe, you have plastic pipe, and that's exactly why we have the partnership with UNLV, is to test it on our particular pipe types that we have in our system to see how it interacts with the pipe types, but also with respect to appliances and how they perform with respect to conversions and things like that. And so I do know that, for instance, in Hawaii, I think they currently blend 15 to 20% of hydrogen. I know that's what our testing is going to be, is up to like 15 to 20%. I have heard that with respect to some like cast iron and steel pipe, which might be what the situation is in England that you referred to, that it does have more of a propensity to leak and things. And so that, again, that's, I think, part of that research and development activity that we're undertaking, that, first and foremost, we want to make sure everything's safe, right? And then, so we'll continue to study that to make sure that it's performing before we would, start to introduce any kind of significant levels of hydrogen into the system. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll go back to Assemblywoman Peters.
This is becoming a trend in these afternoon committees. I apologize, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. So in my community, the area that I live in, not everybody's hooked up to natural gas still. My neighbor next door, they have an external tank of oil because they're not connected to natural gas. So can you talk a little bit about, as we're talking about the broader scale of expanding natural gas accessibility, what are we doing in our communities to ensure that just neighborhoods in general have access?
Chairman Watts, Assemblywoman Peters, yeah, that's, so.
Please say your name for the record, and you can go directly to the member.
Thank you. Justin Brown, Southwest Gas. Yeah, so we have a couple of different things. So we had the SB 151, which is more of the expansion underserved, unserved areas, but we've also have a residential amortization tariff that's been in place that we're able to work with as customers express interest, right, of hooking up, and maybe it's already in a neighborhood, and to your, as you described, maybe a home in particular or a certain part of that neighborhood did not have gas service when the builder built out. This program is a way to us to extend facilities to those areas as well. I don't believe we have any necessarily direct outreach. It's more of, as people express interest, we're willing to go out, look at what the opportunities are, provide, cost estimates and things like that.
I'm going to follow up with you offline about this because I think in our area, there's cost prohibitive factors from the residents' side of it that maybe we need to, I'm not looking in the right place.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking that offline. Next, we will go to Vice Chair Brown-May.
Thank you, Chair Watts. Thank you for the great presentation, gentlemen. I have a question relative to greenhouse gas emissions, right? I think it's the elephant that's always in the room when we talk about gas utilities. And so I'm curious to know what is your plan to address greenhouse gas emissions from this utility? Do you have specific goals that you're attempting to meet with regard to reducing greenhouse gas emissions? Can you just share your plan with us?
Yeah, Vice Chair Brown-May, yes, Justin Brown, Southwest Gas. So I think I think it's a multifaceted approach, right? So I think natural gas has a tremendous proven track record of reducing GHG emissions. I think the Energy Information Administration published that since 2005, I think it is, that 65%, 66% of the GHG emission reductions are attributable to using natural gas. So actually using natural gas to displace higher carbon intensive fuels, right? That was some of the things that we mentioned with respect to the benefit of Spring Creek and Mesquite that we're seeing by displacing higher carbon intensive. I think RTC of Southern Nevada is another great example, right, where we're able to, and it might be a little bit counterintuitive to some people, right, because you're actually increasing natural gas, but the benefit is you're actually reducing greenhouse gas emissions because you're displacing higher carbon intensive fuels. So I think that's kind of one pathway. And then I think to your point, the things that we're doing, again, it's the research and development activity, partnership with the UNOV, the regional hydrogen hub, things like the renewable natural gas projects that we're looking at, right? So those are all things that what we can do in terms of helping introduce that into our infrastructure to help reduce the carbon intensity of natural gas, right? So you have natural gas displacing higher carbon intensive fuels, reducing GHG emissions, and then as we look at continuous ways to innovate and introduce clean fuel technologies into our system, that's further going to drive down GHG emissions.
Thank you. Members, any additional questions? All right. I do have one on the planning concept, tying back to the policy that you discussed around some of these economic development projects, to Spring Creek in particular, I think Mesquite as well. Would this planning process apply to, as you take this kind of holistic look, would that also include consideration of future economic development expansion projects?
Chairman Watts, Justin Brown with Southwest Gas, and yeah, that is exactly the types of activities that we're talking about that would be incorporated into that process to make sure they were considered.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much for your time and for your presentation today. With that, members, we are able to move on to the last item on our agenda today, which is public comment. For those who wish to provide public comment by phone, please dial 669-900-6833, and when prompted, enter the meeting ID 894-5819-4583 and press the pound sign. Our broadcast and production services staff will indicate when it's your turn to speak. Remember, we are limiting public comment to 2 minutes and ask you to state and spell your name before beginning. With that, do we have anyone wishing to provide public comment here in Carson City? Seeing no takers here, do we have anyone wishing to provide public comment in Las Vegas? Seeing none, broadcast production services, can we see if we have anyone wishing to provide public comment by phone?
Chair, the public line is open and working. However, there are no callers to participate at this time.
All right. Thank you again, both members, for all your engagement today. It was a bit of a long meeting, but we powered through it. And thank you again to all of our presenters. Our next meeting will be on Tuesday, February 14th at 1:30 p.m. This meeting's adjourned.